my name is Sarah, and I'm trying to read 100 books in 100 days. This is my second review and my third preview in my 100-day, 100-book challenge. If you want more information on why I'm doing this and what my rules are, definitely go back and check out my introduction review for more information. But as a quick recap, I'm following 4 rules in this challenge. My first is that I want at least 30% of the books that I read to be in my vegetable category. So that's classics or nonfiction. My second rule is that I want at most 30% of the books that I read to be rereads. My third rule is that I want the money spent on this to be at most $50 per month. And my fourth rule is that I want the total page count for this to be at least 25,000, so that my average book length is about 250 pages. My second group of reading I thought was great. I'm very happy that I did this. I think the biggest thing that's been hard for me is just keeping up with the videos and recording everything. The reading's super easy because I'm picking out a lot of really good books, but it's all the administrative stuff that's really hard. Not keep you too much, I'm gonna dive right into my reviews in my second group of 10, and then at the end I'll preview my third group of 10 books. So my first review, I'm actually gonna review 2 books, and that's the second 2 books in Marissa Meyer's Renegade series. This series ended awesome. In fact, I liked Arch Enemies so much that I couldn't help but stay up and read Supernova straight through. It was a really rough day the next morning, but 100% worth it. I think Marissa Meyers did a really awesome job of crafting an ending that I don't think I ever would have thought of, but she set enough breadcrumbs along the way and the transitions well enough that it made it believable. I think you see still a lot of growth in the characters, and you see the friendships and relationships between the characters continue to develop and really make me feel for them as they're going through this. Nova continues to be an awesome character. Even when she's faced with really tough options, she does an awesome job of being inventive and staying true to herself. My only real qualm is that I think the last third of Supernova, everyone's just a little too trusting. Like, a lot of stuff happens, borderline betrayals, and everyone's just kind of hunky-dory to just believe everyone else. I think that was a little bit unrealistic. I wish that we got to see more of Nova and Adrian together. But otherwise, I thought it was a really awesome series, and I think the ending did the first book justice, and I'm very happy for that. My second in my group of sequels is The Toll. So this is the final book in the Arc of the Scythe series. We get to see what happens after we watch the cliffhanger with Rowan and Citra. I think it did a really great job of, again, similar to Supernova, crafting an ending that I would never have thought of, but made sense in what was happening for the characters. And I think that was a really awesome piece of the book. I think Citra and Rowan continue to be characters that are really inspiring to me. And even though it's a long book, I mean, I think my copy was over 600 pages, it kept moving, which I appreciated. And there was never a piece that I really felt like it was dull. They did a really good job of eventually overcoming. Goddard has kind of this chokehold on the world, and it feels like everything's so inevitable, and every turn he's there cutting off our protagonists. But Citra and Rowan and Grayson, they overcome. Another book that I felt really lived up to its predecessors, and I'm very happy that I read. My final in my kind of group of sequels is Vengeful. So this was the follow-up to V.E. Schwab's Vicious, and it was really good. We got to learn more information about Eli Ever's backstory, which I think was something that I didn't totally realize I needed after Vicious, but when I got it in Vengeful, I was very thankful for it, and actually made me like him a lot more as a character. We got to learn more about Sydney, and we're introduced to two new really interesting female characters, that being Marcella and June. I'm hoping that June is going to get more of a story later in the series because her powers, I think, are the most interesting and cool. I think my only real qualm on it was that I felt like the ending was kind of rushed and unmemorable. As I was going back through my notes for this video, I realized that I didn't really remember a ton about the ending. And that was just kind of disappointing. With how good these books are, I wish the ending was more defined and had more oomph to it. If this ends up being part of a trilogy, I guess it would kind of make sense. But it's been so strong so far, and I just wish there was a little bit more power through the end of the book. But overall, I really enjoyed it. My next review is for William D. Cohen's Why Wall Street Matters. And I thought this book did a really good job of balancing introducing the financial system and Wall Street in general to newcomers in finance. You don't have to be an expert to read this book and get value out of it. But if you do know a little bit more about the financial system and maybe work in finance, I think it still provided enough unique, interesting information that it still proves to be valuable. Next is Thomas Piketty's An Economics of Inequality. And overall, I thought this book was a decent introduction to the topic, but after reading his Capital in the 21st Century, it kind of just felt like Capital Light. If you're gonna go through the trouble of reading it, you should go to the trouble of reading Capital instead, because it provides much more information on the topic versus this just kind of glossing over and covering the basics of the topic. But overall, I thought it was, satisfactory, I guess. My next review and my final physical book that I have is Diarrhea: An Oxygen Thief. It's not as bad as Dorian Gray, but it's not great. It's mostly a stream of consciousness novel, which I'm starting to learn I don't like. The character is whiny and misogynistic, and at his core, really just a jerk. And I didn't like it. It wasn't like how I've kind of liked Lord Henry and Picture to Dorian Gray, and how I liked Xena in Ethan Frome. Did none of those sassy type of things to me and just mostly came off as a jerk. I think it was laid out better and easier to read than Picture of Dorian Gray, so that's what saves it from being a complete loss. Now on to my books that I was able to get on Overdrive. So my first one that I'm going to cover is Little Fires Everywhere. So this was recommended to me by my friend Emily, and I thought it was really good, and it definitely lives up to the hype. I thought that the book did a really good job of covering a number of difficult topics to talk about, and doing it in a masterful way, and doing it in a really good story that made me care about this wide variety of characters and still understand all their individual motivation. I think everything that happens and the story itself, for somebody who really likes fantasy, it still did a really good job of keeping me engaged, even though there's not outlandish big things happening. The next one that I'm going to cover is A Curse So Dark and Lonely. So this is a Beauty and the Beast retelling. It has a female protagonist that has a disability. It doesn't have a ton of insta-love, which I like, and I think the character is truly a pretty good example of a strong female protagonist. That said, it was good, but after reading all these other books, it didn't particularly stand out, but it was a solid YA novel that I thought had a decent romance and was overall worth the read. My final book that I'm going to cover is my last vegetable as well, and that's Animal Farm. So this was actually a reread for me, and I read it on Hoopla. I really enjoyed it. I'm glad that I reread it. I actually remember it being a little bit longer when I read it as a kid, but I think that makes it even better. Being able to pack that much of a punch and tell that interesting of a story really speaks to what a great author George Orwell is. Although every time I read his work, I get a little bit fearful for the world, but it does kind of jazz me up and make me feel like I want to do something about it. So some really awesome books that I got to read in this section, and I'm really looking forward to the ones that I read in my next section as well. So I'll get into those now. My first book that I'm going to cover is The Virgin Suicides. So this I saw on the shelves of Barnes & Noble a number of months back, and it just looked interesting. And then when I looked into it, it was actually, you know, kind of considered a modern classic, written about 25 years ago. And it's set in Detroit, which is my hometown. My next one was a gift from a friend of mine named Sam, and it's called Dark Matter. So what I got from the synopsis and talking to him is it's set in this universe where it's actually a multiverse. And this doctor is trying to get back to his timeline with his family and his child and his wife, and wade his way through all these different alternate realities. So my next two were loans from my mom, who is a big Mitch Albom fan. So he's a Detroit writer that's known mostly for his short life lesson-y type books. And so I'm going to be doing two of these in my group 3. And the first one that I'm going to talk about is The 5 People You Meet in Heaven. From my understanding from my mom is it's basically covering main character who dies as an old man and enters heaven and meets 5 people there. From what I know about Mitch Albom, I'm assuming this is going to be like kind of the touchy-feelsy type of book, which I think will be really good. My next Mitch Albom book is Tuesdays with Morrie, which I just remember as a kid my mom talking about a ton. I've never read it myself, so I think this will be a really good time to do it. It's also short and sweet, so that will hopefully help balance out some of the big boys that we have. It's actually a memoir of Mitch going back to see his old college professor while his professor is dying of ALS. And basically, the author spends Tuesdays with his professor, Morrie, where Morrie espouses all these life lessons that he's learned. So now moving on to the books that I'm going to be getting through Overdrive. The first one that I'm going to talk about is Children of Blood and Bone. So this is a YA fantasy book that's actually made a ton of different recommended lists and reviews lists and everything like that. So I think it should be really good. What I've gotten from the synopsis is that the main character, Zelly, is part of your persecuted group of people that used to have access to magical powers. The current kingdom that she lives in is ruled by a king who does not like these people, and therefore the people are oppressed. My next one that I'm reading is an adult thriller novel called The Anonymous Girl. So this was recommended to me at work by a couple different people. And from what I gather, it's about a girl that signs up for an anonymous study, and things get twisted from there. My next one that I'm going to talk about is Educated. So that's a memoir of an author who grows up with survivalist parents and her journey to getting an education and overcoming the fact that she did not go through a formal education system. With how much I like the Renegade series, I decided that I really wanted to read more of Marissa Meyer's work. So in this group, I decided to include Cinder, which is the first in the Lunar Chronicles. I'm really pumped to be able to read more of her work, and hopefully it's just as good as the Renegade series. My final book and my last vegetable is The Magician's Nephew. So this book is the first in the Chronicles of Narnia series, which was one of my childhood favorite series. I'm getting it through Overdrive, and I noticed they have the entire series on there, so I'm hoping this gives me an opportunity to go through it and hopefully rekindle my love of the series. So that's my group 3. A lot of different cool books, a lot of variety in the books, and hopefully it should help me get through them all. This group is going to be a little bit shorter than my past one, which was 3,300 pages. This one will be 3,200 pages. I'm now at 3,900 pages after I finish group 3. That's so many! Luckily, I didn't have to spend any money on the books that are in this grouping, so my total money spent thus far is $39, and we're now in a new month, so I reset my balance back up to $50. So far I've had 2 rereads and I'm on track with my vegetable books. So overall I think I'm in a pretty good place. I know I have a couple big commitments coming up outside of this challenge, and so I'm hoping I can still keep my clip, although I'm realistic that I might have to sanity check and use up some of the lead that I've already created for myself and just enjoy everything else that's going on. I hope you stay to see the rest of my journey, to see me read the rest of my 100 books, because I think this should be really interesting. This has been a big experience for me. So wish me luck.